So my protein paper is over insulin. The article I chose is from the British Medical Journal. It's titled Human Insulin by John Pickup. In this article, he speaks of his experiment, which he did clinically, about diabetic patients and the anti-insulin antibodies that are produced with certain insulin that is used. He also did state the main point of this experiment was to try to find an insulin with reduced immunogenicity, and that is going to have a reduced cost and greater and readily available worldwide for diabetic patients. In this article, he explains how the insulin that we use now in our diabetic patients is made from beef and pig pancreas. So it's an animal insulin that differs by one insulin receptor, but it's almost identically the same, with the exception of the one receptor. He goes on to explain that with the two insulins that he's planning to test with as a human insulin, which he was able to take from a cadaver's pancreas, then produce, of course, into the human insulin, being that it came straight from a human. And then they also created a biosynthetic insulin that is almost identical to that of the human insulin. They gave each of these three things to patients in their clinical studies, and they then tested them for the antibodies that were produced over time. In the experiments, clearly they saw with the animal insulin that there were a lot more antibodies produced, which then eventually led to the immunity of the insulin on the patient, meaning that, it didn't work anymore. It does not affect them in the same. They take greater amounts, and eventually it's not going to work at all. With the human insulin, because it is human insulin, it is identical to what the body produces. It is the same thing. There were no antibodies produced because it wasn't seen as anything foreign. The biosynthetic as well did not produce nearly as many antibodies because it is almost identical to that of the humans. Although in the animal insulin it is identical minus the one receptor, it was acknowledged and identified that more antibodies were produced with that, therefore leading for the human insulin to be the best one. They also were able to determine that human and biosynthetic insulin was able to be produced at a cheaper cost, making it more readily available. I chose this article because it does explain in detail how insulin works in the body, what the protein receptors are, and how it goes on to produce and affect those with diabetes, and how it helps to, so to speak, cure what they have, at least for a short amount of time, so that they can function normally, since we do need insulin in our bodies to go on about our days.